Time moved forwards at a sluggish pace. Like sand seeping through the hole in an hourglass, the days of ceaseless torture were starting to become one, as the never-ending cycle showed no signs of relenting, always promising that the day of prophecy was near, but never quite was. The child yearned for a life he could never have, dreaming of a life where he lived happy, before being dragged back to the cruel and cold reality he is prisoner to. However, it is the nature of life that everything must turn a new leaf. There was a day that the followers took the child from the depths and into the light of the sun, just atop the cliffside that their lair resided. The view was a sight to behold. Meadows that expanded far off into the horizon as the dawning sun was rising over the world's edge, and in the distance, a kingdom that watched over the land, its silhouette cast by the rising sun and shadowing the land for seemingly miles on end. And while the child could not see any of this, he could certainly feel it as the wind blew across him and the sun's warmth caressed his face. The followers had brought him here to test him on his powers that the prophecy foretold, in which he would gain the powers of a god and be able to control the very essence that allows life to exist in the first place, so that he could harness these powers and be ready for when they would unleash them upon the enemy of old. A follower stepped forth and held out a strange device. This apparatus was to help with unlocking of these powers, a two-way device that on one end holds a small amount of essence, and on the other, a blood sample would be taken and placed inside, in which twisting the device would cause them to form as one and cause an alignment inside the child and allow him to use his newfound powers. The reasoning for such a device lay in the fact that the followers had no actual idea of how to begin to train his powers, let alone teach someone else how to use it. However, using such a device would come at a cost. The device would always need to be with the child, as without it, he would be unable to use his powers. Taking the child's hand, they pricked the top of his finger to draw blood into the device. As they waited for the device to prepare, another follower came along holding what appeared to be folded cloth. Unraveling it revealed it to be a ceremonial garment for the child to wear during the ceremony. It was then that a small clicking sound was heard coming from the device to signal that it was ready. They then attached it to the child's waist and started stepping backward. Seconds passed as the wind continued to blow across them, until suddenly, a golden outline formed around the child. The essence has connected with him, become one with him. The child then began to feel an immense surge of power within them. Their spirit felt as if it was ascending higher than ever before, as all their senses heightened, making them hyper-aware of his surroundings, almost making up for the fact of his lost sight. But that was when it happened. When a follower stepped forward to try and remove the device from him, he felt himself grab the arm of the follower and holding them in place. Silence dropped across everyone, as clouds started to seemingly form overhead of them. The child could not let go. The power was too much for him to handle, and instead began controlling him, almost as if it was acting through him. The child then pulled the follower towards him as he struck them across the face and sent them to the ground. The followers took a step back in surprise, unsure of what to do. A follower then demanded that the child hand over the device at once, and they may be spared from punishment. The child gave no response. Instead, his shoulders began moving, It appeared as if he was laughing at them. He claims they no longer hold power over them, for they have handed that power to him now. It was then that the follower pulled back his cloak to reveal a ceremonial sword. This time they issue a final warning, to which the child chortled at the mere thought of it. Never before had the child outspoken against the followers. It seemed his newfound powers were now giving him the confidence to do so. The followers would no longer tolerate this treason, and so, together as one, all the followers withdrew their swords and held them upwards as they started walking forward, their formation closing in on the child. But the child did not flinch. Instead, they felt an inner voice within, speaking to them, telling them a single word: jump. The child then leapt up into the air and soared beyond the clouds with great force and power behind his jump, before he then came to a stop. Floating amongst the ether, the child had regained control as he started to panic. They couldn't begin to comprehend what was happening. The scene around him reminiscent of when he was first brought into being. "Do not fear us," a whisper spoke inside the child's mind. The child yelled out their confusion, but did not receive an answer. Instead, they lost control again and became a prisoner inside his own mind and body. It was then that the child started falling from the sky, picking up speed the further they fell, as a shield of fire formed around them, from which even the morning sky was still visible. They fell further and further until they punched right through the ground, leaving a gaping crater and sending shockwaves for miles. But still, they did not stop. They kept carving their way through the planet's layers, eventually reaching the core, and when they did, that too was obliterated from the collision as the child punched through all the way to the other side of the planet. Exiting out from the other side, silence covered the land for what felt like centuries, until the ground began shaking violently. The world started falling apart. The scene was one of total hell. The ground formed massive cracks as they started pulling away from each other. Mountains beginning to crumble, some even collapsing in on themselves. The kingdom in the distance saw its castle shatter, and the spires crumble, and the walls shattered. The scene continued for several more minutes. Then, from out of nowhere, the planet completely exploded, following an unstable reaction from the core, sending rocks and waves of devastating energy through the galaxy. As for the child, they were flung into the far-off reaches of space after the shockwaves pushed him for miles on end. And with this, the prophecy had taken a new form, with no one to know what the final outcome would be.